I want you to meet Dorothy and Bill Wacker. This lovely couple lived in, oh crap, where was it that they lived? Stark County, Ohio. They've been married for 48 years. 48 years. When nowadays can you honestly say you've heard of a family that's been married that long? I've never seen a Hollywood couple or a rock and roll couple be married for 48 years. This is something they don't make many of anymore. You don't see marriages last that long. I'm sorry, it's a little bit of a going off track. Anyway, these two lovely people have been married for 48 years, as I mentioned. And you would think that they've seen it all. The highs and the lows, the good and the bad. Well, these two people, even though that they've done a lot for their community, they actually they were dealing with a lot of low points. For some reason, they were made the constant targets of a hate or a campaign of terror. Nobody knows who was responsible. Nobody knows. Anyway, the campaign of terror, as I call it, started between 84 and 1985. It started when Bill and Dorothy came home from shopping, and to Dorothy's horror, she found out that their house was ransacked, as you can see. They just don't understand why they were made to be the victims of some sick person's anger. This wouldn't be the first time, and it sadly wasn't the last time, of various levels of injustice that these people had to deal with. A few weeks later, after the home invasion, Dorothy was home alone when there was a knock at her door. She answered it, and there was a young guy who was having car problems. He asked if he could use the phone to call a tow truck. Being the nice lady that Dorothy was, she said sure, and he came in. Sadly enough, Dorothy, being the nice lady she is, didn't pay much attention. The guy told her that he was done with the call. He said thank you, and she assumed that he up and left. Well, what she did not know is that he actually came into the kitchen behind her and viciously assaulted her. When Dorothy came to, she found out she was not only gagged, but her feet and hands were bound. She couldn't get free, so basically what she did was she started trying to scream as much as she could. Thankfully, the window to the kitchen was open, so the neighbors next door were able to hear the muffled cries for help that she was producing. When Bill returns home, he is greeted by the police and the sheriffs as they are trying to take care of his wife. He makes it in and finally sees the extent of what she had to go through. The person who assaulted Dorothy stole 4 belongings of theirs, But anyway, they were one thing was a .22 caliber revolver. Another was an antique watch. The third item was a movie camera, and the final piece of property that was stolen was a radio scanner. Not being content with only stealing and assaulting an elderly lady, the person who did all this left a cryptic message on the wall. The message basically read, "Cheaper, but will do." The sheriff of Stark County, Ohio, went on record saying that he just does not understand what could be the purpose of this campaign of terror that the Wackers have had to endure over the years. They were not. There's been no motive. The Wackers basically had no bad blood with anyone. They normally, when there's a crime or there's a problem, there's always a catalyst. And when it comes to these two elderly people, they can never find what drove this person to do the crimes that he did. If assaulting and theft was not bad enough that these people had to endure, they were then sent several taunting messages. Each one was worse than the other. The sheriff believes that the person or people who were responsible for writing this were using their opposite hand to try to throw off the law officials. Even though they have these messages or letters or whatever you call them in evidence, they were never able to find out who wrote them. The person tormenting the Wackers decided to up the game, as first it was a ransacked house, then it was an assault, then it was theft. Now the person has moved into the realm of phone harassment. Normally it was Dorothy that was the victim of this. Basically, he would call and she would answer, and normally it would either be the person just breathing heavy into the phone, or basically him telling her what it is he was going to do to her. Suffice to say, for modesty's sake, I will not say what it was that he told her, but it's nothing that anyone should have to deal with. Peggy Hoover, who turns out to be Dorothy and Bill's daughter, also pays a visit to the show, and she basically says that she does not understand who would want to do this to her family. Her family has been doing good for the community, that they help volunteer and they try to be good, decent people, and it's just really confusing to her why it is that people who have done nothing to anyone would be all of a sudden made a target of such hatred. In a shocking turnabout, the items that were stolen a few years earlier all of a sudden started to be returned. It started with the gun, and then from there, all the other 3 items that were stolen were eventually returned. The sheriff went on record saying he does not understand why they would want to return the gun. Normally, when you steal something, if you don't have any purpose for it, normally people sell it to get money for it. They don't normally return the stolen property to the people that they stole it from. Maybe the person returning the gun viewed it as a game, because once it was a couple weeks after the gun was returned that Bill and his wife were watching TV, when all of a sudden the tormentor hits the house either with his fist or with a rock or something, but it gets their attention, and Bill he's been basically fed up. He grabs his gun and loads it, and he plans on going outside to confront the person who's been causing them years of torment. Bill makes it to the front porch with his gun and starts looking around. But as always, it seems that the person tormenting them was one step ahead, because once he got out there, there was nothing that could be seen. It ultimately makes them wonder what the whole deal is all about. In an attempt to try to finally catch the person who's been harassing them, Bill and his family set up a stakeout where Bill was in a trailer nearby the house where he could have a good view of the front porch. Bill's son-in-law, along with his brother, stayed in a van across the street opposite of the Wacker's residence. Dorothy was in the house with her daughter as they were just trying to maintain the charade of trying to lure the person in to do this, to capture them. Somehow the criminal was made aware of the stakeout because once it was over, that's when he decided to make his next move. When everybody was finally starting to relax and leave their positions, once again the tormentor hit the house and left a message. The message that the person left this time was basically said, "Get the message." It basically all came to a head a few nights later when Dorothy went to let their dog out to use the bathroom. As Dorothy had her back to the house watching their dog go to the bathroom, she was violently and brutally assaulted. This time she suffered severe skull fractures and injuries that if she was not taken care of, it would have killed her. Thankfully, she was rescued in time. The downside is because they couldn't find a suspect, the police had to start looking at the people closest to Dorothy, and that being her husband Bill. The police asked her if she thought that Bill could have been the one doing all the stuff that was going on, and she steadfastly said no, it was not Bill. That could not have been him. Sadly, it's not known exactly how long the reign of terror continued on past this episode that Unsolved Mysteries produced. Also, sadly, in the year 1999, Bill Wacker ended up dying. It was never revealed who it was that did these heinous crimes to these two innocent people. Also, sadly, Dorothy Wacker also died in the year 2010, near roughly 11 years after the death of her husband. She was at a young age of 83. It's also unknown that after Bill died, if the harassment continued. I honestly hope not. But that basically closes the chapter of the reign of terror against the Wacker family. Bill and Dorothy Wacker may be dead, but let's try to get justice for them anyway. This is a drawn composite of the person who assaulted Dorothy Wacker in the house. It's unknown if this is the same person that actually assaulted her in the backyard. I'm personally guessing that it probably is. As I said, Dorothy and Bill may be dead, but let's try to get some justice and bring some peace to their family. Odds are this person's still alive. If you've seen this person or you think you know who this person may be, contact your local law enforcement. Just show them this video, like let's get the word out about this person. Somebody has to know who this person is. This person has to have a family. Let's make sure that this person doesn't do the same thing to the Wackers that he may do down the road. Now let's go into my final thoughts. If you watched episode 1, which was entitled scared to death, you will have learned about Cindy James. Now, I mentioned this case at the end of that case because I personally think that if not that I think personally that these two cases share a lot in common. If you remember the first case, episode 1, Cindy James was being attacked via different ways: letters, vandalism, outright assault, and it ultimately led to her death. Now, granted, the Wackers were in Ohio, and what happened with Cindy James happened in British Columbia, but it seems too coincidental, and that's why I think here's a list of who I think could have done these things to the Wackers. Here's my final thought about who could have done this to the Wackers. I think, honestly, the person in the drawing was probably the most likely suspect. He's the one that attacked Dorothy. She was able to, have memory, and her memory was fresh enough from the assault, she could have the person be drawn, when the cops were talking to her. I personally am really curious. This could just be a far-reaching, oh god, what's the word I'm thinking of? Conspiracy, that's it. What if it was Cindy James' ex-husband? In the first episode I did, he refused to even be on camera. He didn't want anything to do with that case in Cindy James. You would think that, they were married, that he must have loved her. What kind of person who loves somebody would not want justice, to me it just seems weird that the person wanted nothing to do with it, and to me it makes him look guilty. The other possibility is it could be that same sadistic gang that harassed Cindy James, which ultimately led to her death. I, honestly don't think that it's a far reach that they may have left BC and headed into the United States. And that the Wackers were their next target. What we need to do is find out if there was any more groups of people or families or whatever that were harassed on the same level that both Cindy James and the Wackers were. Okay, that's basically it for this episode. As always, leave your comments after, when you watch this. Let me know what you think. Drop, if you want, do a reply or just comment about what you think or who you think could have done this to the Wacker family. Let's see what you guys have to say, Until next time, take it easy and stay safe out there, everyone. Good night.